are back, joined by our partner, our colleague, host of the Ryen Russillo podcast right here on FanDuel TV. Look at him. You know he hates being up this early.
Looking swole, Ryen.
Ryen, there's no better way. I mean, this is our first show with you this season. We got all kinds of preseason love to do, but the Celtics, we have to start there. Your Celtics. It's hard to believe because there were so many haters. I guess myself was included last season. I didn't think they would get it done. They most certainly did.
We never talked about that, by the way. You were such a hater.
I just admitted it. I'm authentic. But is it possible that they will be better this year than they were last?
I don't know if the record will be better. You win 64 games. You could argue they actually played below that. I mean, they smoked everybody in the East. They won the conference by 14 games. And as they were putting together this historic statistical season, I know, watching them all the time, I was like, are they going to get weird, though, late in some of these playoff games offensively? Because I kept seeing it happen in the regular season games, but it was never this fatal flaw. And you could argue it happened twice in the NBA Finals, and it still didn't matter. It was such a bad matchup for Dallas because Dallas was going to get spaced out in a way that they hadn't really had to face yet. And I think the only thing that gets in their way is just complacency. The Porzingis injury. I think for 3 years I've been wondering how much longer can Al Horford go, and he continues to go. So, I don't know how he does it. I mean, he's played so many big minutes for this team, especially with the Porzingis part. The Porzingis part was supposed to unlock all these different versions of what they could do in the playoffs, and they didn't even need it. So the only way, it would only be human nature. Human nature would be the only way, because I still think that they're collectively young enough. I understand Drew and Al, but I still think the core pieces of Tatum and Brown, who play all the time, and White is young enough, that they should still be motivated to put this thing together. So I picked OKC just because I think it's so hard to repeat, but I think they meet in the finals, and I might be wrong.
I think that's a fun finals. It's funny you say that too, because as sports nerds, we're always like, oh, the hangover after a championship. Whether you buy into that or not is one thing, but the fact is you have Jayson Tatum, who was by all means disrespected, at least in a lot of people's minds over the course of the summer. Jaylen Brown, who was also disrespected, not being chosen, all of the things that went down with that. You couldn't have handed them more motivation. Are we looking at a Tatum MVP type season? And is it possible he is going to get an MVP?
Whenever I look at MVP voting, I think that you have to kind of look at the momentum of it, because I think people just get fatigued. I don't know if Jokic can win it again this year because he's won it so many times, and you could argue he was still a deserving vote in the year Embiid won it. Then sometimes I'll think of a playoff exit for somebody who's on that MVP line, and it's if they have an embarrassing playoff exit, I think then that's kind of like a hangover in the eyes of voters, being well, this guy's put up all these stats, but remember when he lost in the second round just last year? So whenever I look at Tatum, Tatum's in this weird spot in that, guess what? He's never going to be Jokic, peak Giannis, Luka. He's not those guys. That's okay. He's better than the other 460 players, So the problem is, though, when you start talking about MVP for him, I don't know that he's ever going to be selfish enough with the talent on this team and dynamic enough to have a Luka statistical season to win it. So I wouldn't pick him. But I think, it's okay to be maybe the 5th or 6th best player in the NBA.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that Jayson Tatum, I think his year would be now, just after everything this summer, and the Jaylen Brown's best player on his team, and all that basically stuff that he's gone through. But you're right, his team is so good, but I don't think his numbers, the only thing holding him back from him is his numbers aren't going to be gaudy enough like these other. SGA
right.
could put up 35 a game, and they're going to be the #1 seed in the Western Conference. I think that might give him the edge, but I think it's Tatum's year. I hated what they did to him this summer. I hate how they bring him to the Olympics. They played 2 other guys on his team. I didn't like any of that.
Nice,
so I think now he's got motivation. He's got more stuff to prove.
But I like the perspective, though. Like you said, he's not going to be selfish enough to go out and get those numbers. That's just not his style of basketball.
And his team's so good that he doesn't have to do that for them to be the best team in the East. But another team in the East is the 76ers. They obviously upgraded this summer.